Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, sir.
Hi, my name is Prince from Everlast Projects. I was here yesterday with regards to the tender application forms as you advertised it yesterday in the paper. And you told me that I need to come today to meet the gentleman who's in charge of the forms. And you said I should come at 9. Is he here to help me at all?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. The forms are finished.
What do you mean the forms are finished? You know, you said I must be here at 9. I am here at 9, and you tell me the forms are finished. It is 9 o'clock. That's the time that you said I must come.
I said 9 o'clock, but now it's 9:15.
No. I mean, that time between 9 and 9:15 is not so much, such a big gap. You know, let's not just play that game.
No, I'm sorry, sir.
Listen, lady, I am a businessman and my time is very important. So, is the forms here? I need this forms.
As I said, sir, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. Besides, the gentleman in charge has already left.
This is not acceptable. I mean, you said I come here 9 o'clock. I am here 9 o'clock.
Why are you people screaming all over? Don't you know this is an office? Gentlemen, how are you?
Sir, I was trying to explain to him that the forms are finished.
No. I was told to come here at 9 o'clock. Now I'm being told that,
it's all good.
It is 9:15, blah, blah, blah.
It's okay. Excuse me. Can you listen to me? Can you listen?
I have a business to run.
I know. Listen to me. This is a woman, and besides, this is an office environment. You don't come in here and start screaming.
Yes.
All right?
Yeah.
Just calm yourself down. Whatever you want is going to be sorted, okay?
Okay.
And besides, if you have come in here and spoken to the lady with the language she understands, whatever you wanted, you were going to have it by now.
Okay. Yeah. Are you
just come in. Come speak to me.
Okay.
Something and find a way to
Oh, how's it?
I'm alright. You got the cash?
Yeah.
Sure it's complete.
Yeah, man, it is. It's Where's my fork?
Yeah, there we go.
It's fine too. Yeah, same here. Alright.
Let's see you sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, bro.
Africa arise. Let's fight corruption in our continent. In our continent. Africa arise. Let's fight corruption in our continent. In our continent. If we fight against corruption.
The public sector at all levels of national, provincial and local government plays a key role in fostering socio-economic development. Unlike the private sector, the public sector is controlled by the state and has the power and responsibility of driving transformational change towards meeting service delivery targets. The public sector is also made up of public officials whose roles are essentially to serve the public through official functions or acting in an official capacity for a public agency or public enterprise. For instance, a state-owned company or any official or agent of a public international organization. According to the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, a public official means any official or employee of the state or its agencies, including those who have been selected, appointed, or elected to perform activities or functions in the name of the state or in the service of the state at any level of its hierarchy.
why that definition is to make sure that the definition of a public official is all inclusive. Those who are employed in public institutions.
Public officials have the contractual obligation with the citizens to deliver efficient and effective services to the general public. Now, what this means is that those employed in the public service becomes in fact servants to the public. It is a contract between them as a public officer and the general public through the government or the state. As a result, public officials in their daily engagement with the public are required to act in accordance with the tenets of good governance. Now, good governance is promoted when service delivery is free of corruption. The hallmarks of good governance are efficiency, effectiveness, responsibility, equity, transparency, responsiveness, teamwork, accountability, and indeed discipline.
You see, those are the days when people have a perception that corruption is only committed by those who are in the government service. Corruption is committed at many different levels of public institutions, including the state-owned enterprises, including other institutions that are not necessarily run by government, but in one way or another, they are rendering service to the public. That's how corruption is perpetrated. As a result, it's just good to come up with a broader definition of what a public body is or who is a public officer to make sure that you leave no room for corruption.
Walk into many public institutions on the continent and certainly you wouldn't miss some characteristic features. Bookshelves with many old dusty files that no one ever touches. Public servants who are busy doing their own things, such as an attendant who is playing a game of solitaire on the computer while there are long queues of people waiting for service outside. Even when the members of the public get attention, the service provided is often characterized by high levels of unprofessionalism and oftentimes outright acts of corruption. There is no secret about the fact that corruption in the public sector presents colossal problems in Africa, bringing about lack of service delivery, inefficiency, poverty, underdevelopment, and in some serious situations, failure of the state.
It's one of the greatest evils. Because it takes from the poor to enrich a few individuals who might already be rich. And so, we don't get out of the poverty cycle, in Africa especially. Money that should be used for development goes into people's pockets, who then lead a luxurious life when just outside the house over there, someone lives in with no social services, the health services, the hospital might be ill-equipped because the money is not going there. No road infrastructure, education, kids still living or going to school. And the shade of a tree. How can that possibly? That's a great gift.
Corruption in the public sector is a constant reality that ordinary people in Africa face on a daily basis. Indeed, corruption retards socio-economic growth and is very expensive to the poor.
Corruption is actually the worst thing, because basically it means instead of us as African people moving forward, we are actually moving backwards, because it's I don't know, it's more like a disease. It's not only in Africa, but to say, even in the Europe countries, it's also the corruption is actually everywhere. So I guess it's something which is far beyond, I don't know how we can really get to tackle it as Africans, but it has to be dealt with either way.
Corruption is very expensive to the poor, because if you look at the government and like how they the ministers and everyone in the government lives their lives. They have fancy cars, they live in fancy houses, and then you go to rural areas, you find schools with no doors, you find schools where they still go under the tree, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of very expensive to the poor because they don't get anything out of it, you know, because they even pay tax.
It's very expensive. Mostly, it's most expensive for the poor because they feel most of the effects, as opposed to someone who, you know, has some money and actually doesn't feel, you know, the corruption as such. Yeah.
Some experts argue that although corruption within the public sector is a global phenomenon, it manifests itself differently in Africa.
There are different kinds of corruption that take place in society. There is what some refer to as grand corruption, there's what refer to as petty corruption. In a society in which there are rules and procedures, it doesn't mean that corruption will still not take place. In the United States, even in Europe and all that, corruption will still take place. But it's a different kind that takes place there. Most of them are really grand corruption. You hardly find a policeman in London who will say you have to give him $50 or £50. That may not likely happen. But you may find that in some parts of the African continent. But of course, they have grand corruption that take place in the society. Multinational corporations colluding with officials and subverting process and all. It does that happen. But bottom line is that the rules and procedure still take place in those kind of societies. It is not a norm. It happens, but it's not a norm. It's an aberration.
I also think that moving away from a cash economy in Africa has contributed solidly to better governance. Because in the olden days, people would just have large sums of cash, and that made it easier then for the money not to be accounted for. With moving to electronic transfers and things like that, things have improved. There are still problems though.
Corruption in the public sector manifests itself through many ways. Common forms include the abuse of official positions, which involves a public servant using their vested authority improperly to benefit themselves or other public officials or person or entity.
First of all, one will have to understand what corruption is. It's very broad. The classic definition is, most people will understand it, is bribery. So for instance, there's a free service provided by the government, for instance, it's impossible to get it. And you have to pay in order to get it.
If you have several levels and layers and channels which you have to bribe, people wouldn't want to do business in that environment because it's pervaded by uncertainty. You want to operate in an environment that is certain, that is predictable, that you'll have less costs. And where your costs are, you can locate them to say these are my cost levels and these cost levels are former. In a situation in which you have to grease the palm of virtually everybody in the bureaucratic machinery, your cost will go up. And that's one of the reasons why the cost of doing business is still relatively high on the African continent.
We know very well that corruption these days has become so dynamic. It's no longer perpetrated by way of those common offenses that we are used to. It's so dynamic that it takes place, it's perpetrated in such a sophisticated manner. Many different ways and means are used by the corruptees to perpetrate corruption. The madam who was there told us that it seems like there are these who are working with this technological, when we are working on these natural legs, the corruptees have advanced, they've gone a step ahead. And then we need to be ahead of them to see to it that they have got no room to perpetrate corruption.
common occurrences of corruption in the public sector include fraud and embezzlement, which also receives a lot of media attention on the continent. In Africa, it is not unusual to read about large sums of money that have been misappropriated through fraud and embezzlement within public institutions.
Fraud involves an action or behavior by a public servant or other person or entity that deceives others towards obtaining a benefit that would not normally accrue to that public servant or person or entity. For instance, we're seeing this across many parts of Africa, where public servants register ghost workers in order to collect the salaries that accrue to such fictitious employees. Now, in terms of embezzlement, this involves the theft of resources by persons entrusted with the authority and control over such resources. For instance, hospital staff that steal medicines and in turn sell these to private pharmacists. This is common across many parts of Africa.
Abuse of inside information, when people are using this inside information to benefit themselves or to benefit their colleagues, and then under invoicing or double invoicing or false invoicing as well. You know? Forging something which never exists so that payments can be made. Or silent corruption. Silent corruption is also destroying Africa these days. You know how many times have you heard about this bogus non-existing post have been created, and then a person has been also put on the payroll system, and then the money makes a turn and gets into the pockets of those who have created those positions. Yeah? And they created this high position of a director, maybe, or a principal of a particular school, or even tenders that never existed. All these sort of things. How many times people do not go to work, and then these people at the end of the day they are being paid for something they have not served. They did not deserve that money. All these sorts of things amounts to silent corruption, and they are very, very destructive.
Another type of corruption that is very rife in the public sector and which revolves around conflicts of interest is this issue of nepotism, where public servants ensure that their family members and friends and cronies are appointed to public service positions or receive government contracts even when more suitable candidates have applied for that position or tender. Similarly, favoritism involves the provision of services or resources according to the personal affiliations of a public servant, which may include ethnic, religious, and political party affiliations.
Okay, Michael, listen, get the check to the bank. Ask the manager, tell him that I told you to bring the check to him. Ask him to endorse it. Then he brings it to the. Hello, sit down. How are you? Mike, hold on, Mike. Just a minute, Mike. What is your name, madam?
Precious.
Oh, Precious. What can I do for you, Precious?
I'm looking for a job. I saw your vacancy.
Oh, okay. So, young lady, do you have your CV with you?
Yes, I do have.
Okay, can I take a look at it? Oh, okay, that looks good. Oh, come on. Why are you being so vulgar? This is an office, and when you walk in here, you do as we tell you, and you get what you want. So that's how it works.
In order to ensure that public officials are efficient, effective, and accountable in their dealings with the public, some African governments have developed public service charters which set out general principles of good governance and service delivery. These include courtesy and helpfulness, accountability, non-discrimination, information provision, accessibility, consultation and participation, transparency, fairness, teamwork, quality of service, and value for money. For instance, in South Africa, the 8 Batopele principles were developed to serve as a cogent policy and legislative framework regarding service delivery in the public service that is aligned with the tenets of good governance.
So there's still a lot of room for improving good governance, and good governance is partly about public accountability, partly about involving people in planning public affairs, particularly service delivery in the public sector. It then also involves ensuring that there's compliance with the law and other rules when there is implementation. And lastly, there's accountability back to the people when questions are asked around what has been delivered as opposed to what was planned.
Article 7 of the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption provides key recommendations for the effective fight against corruption in the public service.
À l'article 7, où elle vise particulièrement la corruption et les infractions assimilées dans la fonction publique, la Convention exige que tous les agents publics, ou ceux qui sont désignés par exemple les contractuels ou d'autres agents assumant des missions de service public, déclarent leurs biens lors de leur prise de fonction, pendant et à la fin de leur mandat, mission ou contrat. Elle prescrit en outre à la charte des États partis de mettre sur pied un comité interne ou tout autre organe du genre qui sera chargé d'élaborer un code de conduite et de veiller à l'application de ces codes. Sensibiliser et former les agents publics en matière de respect de la déontologie au sein de la fonction publique, adopter des mesures disciplinaires ainsi que des procédures d'enquête en cas de corruption et d'infraction assimilées afin de suivre le rythme des développements technologiques et améliorer l'efficacité des agents chargés des enquêtes. Assurer la transparence, l'équilibre et l'efficacité dans la gestion des procédures d'appel d'offres et de recrutement dans la fonction publique. Enfin, de faire en sorte que toute immunité qui aurait été accordée aux agents publics par la législation nationale ne puisse entraver en rien les poursuites en cas d'acte de corruption dénoncée contre eux.
With the role of the African Union and its organs, such as the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption and other regional structures and initiatives, there is growing optimism in relation to the fight against corruption on the continent.
I would say that things have gotten better over the years. When I studied politics and public administration, there were all sorts of scary stories about how people in Africa generally were managing public monies. There were stories about countries where you could have the Prime Minister or somebody going to Europe to shop just clearly on a public credit card. We don't get many of those stories today. I would say, yes, there are still a lot of problems, but as part of the African Renaissance and the African peer review mechanism, inroads have been made. There's been sharing of best practices, especially around creating laws that provide a solid framework for managing public resources.
Riche continent, dépourvu d'évolution due à la mauvaise gouvernance politique et financière, nos richesses volées, une éducation corrompue qui promouvoit la voyoucratie sénile dans les rues d'Afrique. Lève-toi Afrique et bats-toi contre la corruption qui détruit les mœurs et ton avenir.